Well, hey, good day, Salina First Church of God fam. I want to log on real quick and give you this week's Lenten Devotional, and it goes hand in hand with our sermon from this past Sunday, Jesus feeding the 5,000. You'll remember that the people come to Jesus on the shoreline, and the disciples come to Jesus, and he's been teaching and preaching all day to these people that have met them there, and they're in a remote and desolate place, and the disciples say, Jesus, send these people away. It's getting late in the day, and they're hungry, and we have nothing to feed them with. And Jesus kind of looks at them and says, you feed them. Meaning, don't send them away, but you give them something to eat. And the disciples rebut that. They go very practical. They say something along the lines of, it would take about a half a year's salary for us to feed these people, and you want us to feed them? More than that, where would we even get the food from? And of course, we know that the story goes on that Jesus ends up splitting the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes and feeding the 5,000 people. And I really believe that Jesus was inviting the disciples to be a part of a miracle there. I don't think when Jesus said, you feed them, that he was thinking, go to the local supermarket, go to the local, bread baker and buy as much bread as you can, cast some lines, try and catch some fish, and by your own might and power, pull off feeding these 5,000 people who have gathered in this remote place. I believe in some ways it was a bit of a test to see how the disciples would respond. They had just gone out and teached and preached for him. He had given them some authority. We know that if you've been walking with us on a Sunday morning. And I think there's this idea of Jesus saying here, you feed them. And I actually believe that the invitation was for the disciples to feed the 5,000, to take the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and to give thanks to God in heaven and to pass it out and to see the 5,000 fed. In fact, in the book of John, Jesus says, those who come after me, those who follow me will do greater things than I. And so I think Jesus was inviting them to be a part of a God-sized miracle, but that the disciples' practical nature, well, it got in the way of them being a part of that miracle. When Jesus says, you feed them, their first thought was, we can't afford that. Their first thought was, where would we get these kind of supplies? So our devotion thought today is pretty simple. Don't let your practical side prevent you from being a part of a God-sized miracle. If there's a God-sized opportunity in front of you, don't be the person who says, how in the world are we going to pull this off? Instead, think, what might God do? What could God do in this opportunity? In church, this is something I struggle with immensely. My practical side is always getting in the way. But the disciples got to see an example from Jesus that when he was thinking about feeding them, he wasn't thinking about the practical realities of feeding them. He was thinking about what God was going to do in an amazing way. And I'm not sure what that God-sized miracle will be in your life, but I know if you're anything like me, the practical realities, when God tells me you do it, and I respond often with the practical realities, mean I'm squelching out what he's trying to do in my life. Do you struggle with that? Do you struggle with your practical side kind of coming in and squelching out that faith side? It's what we saw from the disciples in the feeding of the 5,000, but we can take an example from them too. Pushing into the Jesus when there's that God-sized miracle sitting out there, a God-sized situation of we don't know what we would do in our own flesh, and pushing into him knowing that he is a God of miracles. So just that simple thought for you today. Don't let your practical side prevent you from being a part of a God-sized miracle like the disciples were in the feeding of the 5,000. Something for you to think about today. I hope you have a wonderful week.